Nathan Cole didn't expect much for his 40th birthday, maybe dinner with his wife Lena, and a quiet night in. What he got instead was a cruel surprise disguised as a joke. Blindfolded, driven out of town by Lena and her two friends, and left alone at an abandoned train station on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, Nathan was told to find his way back as the group sped off laughing. It was supposed to be harmless fun, they claimed, a way to shake things up. But standing in the gravel lot, with nothing but his wallet and a scarf still warm from his wife's perfume, Nathan realized something deeper had fractured long ago. For 12 years, he had been the dependable one, the steady husband, the high school math teacher who paid the bills and never asked for much. But now, in the silence of rusted rails and broken glass, Nathan saw their laughter for what it truly was, a message. He wasn't a partner anymore, he was an inconvenience. That birthday prank was never meant to be funny, it was meant to break him. What Lena didn't expect was that Nathan wouldn't come back. That instead of begging for an explanation, or crawling back to a home that had already turned its back on him, he would disappear entirely. And from the ashes of that cruel moment, he would begin to build something entirely his own, starting with a decision: walk away and never look back. 2 days before his birthday, Nathan had stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to see. Lena had left her email open on the home computer, which, an uncharacteristic mistake, Nathan hadn't meant to snoop. He'd been looking for a tax document, but the subject line caught his eye. Can't wait for Saturday. Curiosity gave way to dread as he clicked through the chain of messages between Lena and a man named Carter. The emails went back nearly 2 years. Hidden hotel receipts, weekend getaways, snide jokes at Nathan's expense. Then, buried deep in the thread, the worst part: once he's out of the picture, we're free. The stunt Saturday will make it easier to cut ties. He won't fight it, that was the plan. Humiliate Nathan, break his pride, make him so disoriented and embarrassed that he'd accept a quiet divorce without questioning the terms. They weren't just cheating, they were plotting to dismantle him. Nathan sat frozen in the chair, the cursor blinking at the bottom of the screen like a taunt. 12 years of dinners, birthdays, shared bank accounts. None of it had meant anything. All that time, he thought he was part of a team, but Lena had checked out long ago. She just never had the nerve to say it out loud. It wasn't the affair that hurt most. It was the planning, the glee, the effort she put into orchestrating his downfall. The betrayal was calculated, deliberate, and now undeniable. As the numbness faded, something else began to rise. Not rage, not grief, clarity. He forwarded the emails to an address she didn't know he had. Then he sat back and stared at the wall for a long time. This wasn't a crisis to fix, it was a signal. Nathan understood finally what they were trying to say. You don't matter. And that was the moment something inside him broke, but not in the way they'd hoped. Lena thought she was setting the stage for Nathan's collapse. What she didn't realize was that she'd just given him permission to burn everything down and rebuild from the ground up. Nathan didn't storm out or confront Lena. He knew better. Rage would only give her control over the narrative. Instead, he planned in silence. Every moment they spent under the same roof after that felt like acting in a play he no longer believed in. Smiling, nodding, asking about her day. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, he was unraveling the life they'd built together, thread by thread. He started small, cash withdrawals from their joint account in amounts too insignificant to raise flags. $1,000 here, $500 there. Over the next week, he amassed just over $4,000, 0 cents. He dug out his old backpack from college, tucked it behind boxes in the garage, and began filling it with essentials. Passport, birth certificate, his father's old pocket watch, and the title to his late mother's car, which was still in his name. comping still his wedding ring first, then a vintage guitar Lena had given him years ago, followed by a Rolex watch. Mr. Alonso, the owner of a rundown pawn shop on 4th and Hawthorne, didn't ask questions, but he looked at Nathan a little too long before placing a small revolver on the counter. Registered. Legal. You don't look like the type, just in case, he said. Nathan hesitated only for a second before nodding. That night, while Lena slept beside him in bed, Nathan stared at the ceiling, listening to the slow rhythm of her breathing. He wasn't scared, not anymore. The next morning, he called out sick from work, loaded the last few belongings into the backpack, and booked a one-way flight to Barcelona, using his middle name Ellis, and an online travel agency that accepted cash. He called a car to pick him up from the train station outside town, the one they'd used for his birthday prank. Then he left a simple note on the kitchen counter. Don't come looking for me. I won't be there. No dramatic goodbye, no explanation, just an end. At 11:52 IME, he stepped into the back seat of a rideshare, gave the driver the airport address, and didn't look back. Lena thought she'd left him behind at that station. She had no idea he'd already left her long before she drove away. Barcelona hit Nathan like a rush of cold sea air, bracing, unfamiliar, and full of possibility. He arrived with a borrowed name, a backpack, and just under 3,800 euro, 0 cents in cash after currency conversion. The hostel in El Raval was cramped, noisy, and smelled of beer and bleach, but it was cheap and anonymous, exactly what he needed. He registered under Ellis Shaw, a name that carried. At first, the days blurred, jet lag, wandering narrow streets, trying not to look like a man who'd run away. His Spanish was rusty at best, but he kept a phrase book in his pocket and greeted every challenge with quiet determination. On his third day, he found a job listing tacked to the bulletin board of a language school. A small logistics firm called Catalan Supply Partners needed someone fluent in English to organize shipping invoices. The pay was bad, but the hours were steady. He showed up in the only button-down shirt he'd packed, smiled through the interview, and walked out with a job. Aria Martinez, his manager, was sharp, no-nonsense, and skeptical of foreigners, especially Americans. But she appreciated effort, and Nathan had plenty. He stayed late, took notes on everything, and never complained. Not even when he spent 10 hours alphabetizing archived paperwork. At night, he went to free Spanish language exchanges, sat quietly, listened more than he spoke, and scribbled down every phrase he didn't understand. His tiny room above a bakery smelled like yeast and cigarettes, and the mattress had springs that dug into his back. But for the first time in years, he slept without flinching. Over time, his Spanish improved. So did his understanding of logistics, how ports operated, how delays cascaded into profit losses, how small decisions upstream had massive consequences downstream. He kept his head down, didn't talk about America, and introduced himself only as Ellis. No one asked questions, no one knew what he'd left behind, but each new word learned, each invoice processed, felt like a brick in something solid. Nathan wasn't just surviving, he was rebuilding, slowly, deliberately, in a city that didn't care who he used to be. And for now, that anonymity was freedom. He wasn't Nathan the teacher or Lena's discarded husband. He was Ellis Shaw, the quiet guy in the back office who never said no to hard work, and that was enough. 3 months into his job at Catalan Supply Partners, Nathan, still going by Ellis, found something that didn't add up. He'd been reviewing old client payment schedules, double-checking them against shipping invoices, when he spotted it. A client in Marseille had been billed twice for a large shipment, and the company had issued 2 payouts for the same. It wasn't his job to catch mistakes like that. He was supposed to file, log, and keep quiet, but the discrepancy gnawed at him, After double-checking everything 3 times, he printed out the documents and knocked on Aria Martinez's office door. She looked up, clearly irritated at the interruption, until he explained. Her expression shifted from annoyance to disbelief. "You're sure?" she asked, handing over the papers. The next day, the Marseille client confirmed the error, and the finance department recovered the funds. Arias didn't say much, just a curt nod and an email copied to the director of operations. But Nathan noticed a change. She started giving him more responsibility, reviewing vendor contracts, summarizing reports, even sitting in on internal audits. The office began to treat him differently. He wasn't just the quiet American anymore. He was the guy. Outside of work, Nathan kept his routine tight. Spanish lessons 3 nights a week, walks through the city on weekends, and evenings spent in cafes reading books on international trade and supply chain systems. He didn't go out drinking or make many friends. He didn't need distractions. What he needed was momentum. That one catch, his brain, once dulled by routine and disappointment, began sparking again. Numbers made sense, systems clicked into place, patterns revealed themselves, and most importantly, people began to notice. Ellis Shaw was no longer just surviving, he was proving his worth. And for the first time in a long time, someone saw it. Nathan's promotion came without fanfare. Just a short email from Aria with the subject line, "New responsibilities." But it marked a shift. He was now a junior analyst, responsible for reviewing shipping trends, supplier performance, and regional pricing patterns. The work suited him. He loved finding order in chaos, seeing how each shipment delay or pricing fluctuation told part of a bigger story. One day, while compiling a risk report, he noticed something odd. An emerging labor dispute in Tunisia that would likely impact port traffic along several Mediterranean routes. The data was raw and unconfirmed, but his instinct told him it would spiral fast. He flagged it quietly in a memo. That memo found its way to a client, Ward Maritime Group, one of Catalan's top partners. 2 weeks later, the strike hit hard. Most logistics firms scrambled. Ward Maritime, however, had already diverted half its fleet thanks to Nathan's foresight. That's how Sienna Ward, the company's CEO, came to know his name. She flew to Barcelona and requested a private meeting. Nathan expected a quick thank you and a handshake. Instead, she grilled him for nearly an hour about his sources, logic, and assumption. He answered every question without flinching. When the meeting ended, Sienna smiled and said, "I'd like to borrow you for a bit." Just like that, Nathan began splitting his time between Catalan supply partners and consulting for Ward Maritime. He wasn't dazzled by Sienna, though most people were. He respected her. She was direct, brutally smart, and focused on long-term gains instead of quarterly numbers. She didn't care where he went to school or what title he held, only whether he could see what others missed. And he could. In her, Nathan recognized something rare, someone who valued substance over polish. He analyzed her shipping networks, identified underutilized routes, and flagged unstable suppliers before they became problems. Each report he delivered tightened her operation. What started as a side project quickly became his main focus. He still showed up at Catalan out of loyalty, but his future was clearly unfolding elsewhere. Sienna didn't just give him work, she gave him room to think bigger. And for the first time since the day he disappeared, Nathan Cole. It started gradually. Long work days that stretched into dinners, strategy sessions that lingered over espresso, and quiet conversations that had nothing to do with freight costs or port capacity. Sienna Ward wasn't someone Nathan ever expected to get close to. She was the kind of woman who intimidated boardrooms without raising her voice, disciplined, guarded, and always in motion. But beneath that polish was someone deeply human, someone who understood what Nathan never tried to charm her. He didn't flirt or fish for praise. He just showed up, listened, delivered, and stayed out of the spotlight. That somehow disarmed her more than any line could have. One night, after they'd finalized a contingency plan for their Northern European routes, she handed him a glass of scotch and asked, "What made you leave this state?" He hesitated, then gave her the version he'd prepared. Divorce, burnout, the need to start fresh. But when she didn't look away, didn't push, he added quietly, "There was a moment when I realized no one was coming to save me, so I saved myself." Sienna nodded like she understood exactly what that felt like. After that night, something shifted. The silences between them became comfortable. The glances, just a little too long. She never rushed him, never asked more than he was ready to give. And maybe that's why he began to give more. She learned that he used to teach math, that he liked jazz, and that he hadn't spoken to anyone from his old life in over a year. He learned that her marriage ended after a decade of neglect, that her daughter was in college, and that even successful people sometimes wake up feeling like imposters. When he touched her hand one evening, briefly, intentionally, she just looked at him and said, "About time." What followed wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a whirlwind. It was quiet, steady, and rooted in mutual respect. For Nathan, it wasn't just a romance. It was proof that he wasn't broken beyond repair, that the version of himself he was building this time, without pretense, without games, without fear. It was just another Monday morning until Sienna slid a printed proposal across the table during their strategy review. "Take a look at this," she said. "Small U.S. construction firm looking for funding to expand into Europe." Nathan didn't think much of it until he saw the name. Coleman Group. His heart gave a dull thud. The document listed Lena's married name now, Carter, the same man Nathan had once seen laughing with her in emails, mocking his routines and calling him a placeholder. The pitch was polished, full of buzzwords about international growth and green infrastructure, but the numbers were shaky. Revenue was down, debt was up, and their expansion contracts lacked any signed documentation. A familiar pattern. Nathan knew Carter, but now they were one step away from stepping into Sienna's world. Sienna noticed his silence. "You know them?" she asked, brows narrowing. Nathan stared at the proposal, weighing the truth. Then he nodded. "She's my ex-wife. He's the man she left me for." Sienna leaned back, studying him. "Do you want me to drop it?" He shook his head slowly. "No, set the meeting. I want to be there." He wasn't sure if it was for closure or curiosity, but he knew he needed to see them on his terms this time. That week, he reviewed every inch of their financials, marking red flags with a clinical calm. He didn't feel angry. He didn't even feel much at all, just focus. Lena and Carter were reaching beyond their depth, trying to sell a fantasy dressed up in spreadsheets. They didn't know Nathan was on the other side of that table now. They still thought they'd left him in the dirt at that train station 4 years ago. They had no idea he'd rebuilt himself into someone they couldn't even recognize, someone they now had to impress. And as the meeting loomed, Nathan wasn't nervous. He wasn't afraid. He was ready, not to confront them, but to confirm something he already suspected. Their chapter in his life was long since closed. The boardroom at Ward Maritime's New York office was glass-walled and high above the city, sleek and quiet, designed to make visitors feel small. Nathan sat at the far end of the conference table, calm, composed, and completely in control. When Lena and Carter walked in, they didn't recognize him at first. He watched their eyes skim over him until Carter did a double take. Then Lena froze mid-step. Her face paled. "Nathan," she said, disbelief cracking her voice. He gave a polite, professional nod. "Mr. Shaw, actually, strategic advisor to Ward Maritime." The shift in power was immediate. Carter stammered through his presentation, hands fidgeting with the edges of the proposal. Lena barely spoke. Nathan let them talk, let them try to sell their struggling firm with vague promises and fake confidence. When they finished, he slid their financial assessment back across the table. "We've reviewed your numbers. The debt load's too high. No signed international contracts. weak cash flow. It's not a viable investment. Carter opened his mouth to argue, but Nathan cut him off with a look. Steady, unbothered. Then he turned to Lena. You left me blindfolded at a train station and expected me to come crawling back, but I didn't. I built a life, one you'll never be part of. There was no venom in his voice, just truth. Sienna, seated beside him, said nothing. She didn't need to. Nathan had already said everything that mattered. As the two were escorted out, he felt no anger, no regret, only relief. Seeing them again wasn't about revenge. It was about proof that he'd turned a moment of humiliation into a foundation for something greater. As the elevator doors closed on his past, Nathan smiled, for the first time, fully, with nothing behind it but peace. The story of Nathan Cole is a reminder that sometimes the most brutal betrayals are exactly what we need to wake up. When everything familiar is stripped away, our identity, our relationships, our sense of security, we're left with one hard question. Who am I without them? For Nathan, the answer was someone stronger, smarter, and more capable than he ever imagined. He didn't just survive being discarded. The real lesson: your lowest moment doesn't have to define you, but how you respond to it will. You don't need revenge to win. You need reinvention, purpose, and the guts to walk away from what no longer serves you. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of your own strength or potential, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs it. There's always someone out there sitting in their own metaphorical train station, unsure of what comes next. Show them what rebuilding can look like. Show them what freedom really means.